Springfield. I hope you guys are doing well. In this video, I'm going to be explaining the difference between brass instruments and woodwind instruments by playing 3 different instruments. First, we have the French horn. The French horn sounds like this. And this is a brass instrument. The next brass instrument we have is a trumpet, and it sounds like this. And finally, we have this woodwind instrument. Notice that it sounds a lot different than those 2 brass instruments that I just played. So, what makes this saxophone a woodwind instrument and this trumpet a brass instrument? I mean, they're both made of metal. Where does the whole wood part come into the equation? Let's start at the beginning of what makes these 2 instruments fundamentally different. And that's how we play them using our mouths. This is the saxophone mouthpiece. And on the saxophone mouthpiece, we have this piece of wood called a reed. It's a really thin piece of wood. You see how thin that is right there? What happens is, when you blow air into the mouthpiece, this piece of wood vibrates really, really, really fast up against this black part, and that is how sound is produced. Now this is a brass mouthpiece, and what you have to do is you have to make the vibrations happen on your own lips, and it goes like this. When I do that into a mouthpiece, but then if I have an instrument attached to it, oh, it makes it sound way cooler. Check it out. Notice how that works? So, what do both of these instruments have in common? Buttons! On the trumpet or the French horn, when I press buttons, it makes my note go down, like this. Check it out. On the saxophone, I have a lot more buttons, almost like 20 of them, but that's okay. Different combinations do the same thing, come out with different notes. The last thing I want to talk about in today's video is one fun fact for each of these instruments. While the modern trumpet has buttons and looks like this, the original trumpet was made over 3,000 years ago and didn't have any buttons at all. These were made of wood that was hollowed out with tools or with insects. When most people think of the saxophone, they think of the alto saxophone, which is pictured here. But the whole saxophone family has more than 4 instruments. On the left, you have the soprano saxophone, which plays really high notes. On the right, you have the baritone saxophone, which plays really low notes. Now, what instrument do you see here? The French horn? What if I told you it's not from France? The French horn that we know is actually a German instrument. To review, let's go over the instruments that we learned about in this video. First, we have the saxophone, and the saxophone is a woodwind instrument. Next, we have the French horn, which is a brass instrument. And finally, we have the trumpet, which is also a brass instrument. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Bye, Springfield.